is telling us as men to be common, to fall in line, to fall short of any visions or plans God has for us. But what about being uncommon? This is a movement of men seeking to build an eternal legacy. A journey of men on mission to rise above the common, to experience sustainable life change. This is Uncommon Disciple. Welcome to the Uncommon Disciple podcast. My name is Michael Bowen, and with me as always is Jared Gibson.
Hello.
And our very special guest, Paul Espinoza. What's up, Paul?
Hey, man. It's good to be here. I was thinking about, I've been listening to the podcast and knowing that we were going to have this moment. So it's nice to actually be here together. And yeah.
So we're recording live from Remote Junction Community Church in Grand Junction, Colorado, where Paul pastors.
Yeah.
It was a good drive down. And Paul, before we start, I typically will share a verse that the Lord puts on my heart for the guests to kind of give some backdrop to how we met and how this came together. So here in Acts chapter 2, there's a verse here that just after Pentecost and after we read what the early elements of the church were, the breaking of bread, the studying of the word, the prayer, and the communion. There's a verse here in verse 46 that says, "So continuing daily with one accord in the temple and breaking bread from house to house, they ate their food with gladness and simplicity of heart, praising God and having favor with all the people." So the backdrop to this story is that I think it was over 2 years ago. We were living in Minnesota, and we were praying about a place to go on vacation. But of course, you guys know it was during the pandemic, and every place that we wanted to go either wasn't open or there were mass restrictions. And so we were training at a jiu-jitsu academy in Minnesota, and we were considering Colorado as one of the places that we wanted to go visit as a family. And one of the professors at the academy that I was training at said, "Hey, we have a GF team down in Grand Junction, Colorado. Why don't you call them to see if they're open?" So I call Kevin, and I said, "Hey, are you guys open?" And he says, "Hey, bro, in Grand Junction, we don't close." Outside of an apocalypse, I don't think anything shuts Grand Junction down. And so right away, I got excited. I told the family, I said, "Hey, yeah, we're gonna go on vacation." And I asked them 2 questions. I said, "Is jiu-jitsu open?" And I said, "Do you know if the churches are open?" Because we go to churches when we're on vacation. We don't stop. And he says, "Yeah, and as a matter of fact, we have a couple of pastors that train with us here at the Jiu-Jitsu Academy."
Yep.
And I said, "Dude, can you give me one of their numbers? Like, I just want to call them and, talk to them and search their heart a little bit." And he gave me your number. So Jared, I call Paul, right?
Right.
And we have this 45-minute awesome conversation. I remember it like it was yesterday because it was up in my little office in Minnesota. And it was just a spirit-led conversation. We were excited. We had some things in common. And he says, "Hey, bro, when you guys come here, just come right to my house and we're going to have dinner." I've never met the guy, right? I've never seen him. He knew nothing. I could have been like a crazed lunatic. Well, I mean, some people might say, but I could have been, but now our whole family is in the car driving to Grand Junction, having never met Paul or his family. And we pull up to the front of the house and my kids are like, "Dad, is this okay?" And because it's not a normal thing.
Yeah.
It should be in the church.
Yeah. Amongst believers for sure. Yeah.
Right. But
Right.
It's not a normal thing that you normally do.
Yeah.
So, I knock on the door and Paul comes out, we hug and embrace, and it was just normal. And here's the funny thing. I told Jared this on the way down here. I said, you guys didn't even know that song was Korean. Right. But what did Mary make that night that we came in?
Korean beef.
Korean beef.
Yeah.
Right. And so
what are the odds?
Yeah.
It's like we could have made anything.
So I was like, man, the Lord is in this for sure.
Yeah.
And not only that, Jared, Paul is a coffee snob. Like, he's got every coffee making contraption at his house.
Okay.
And you know how I feel about coffee, right?
Serious about your coffee.
Yeah. So we start doing a pour over and he's like, whoa, wait a second. I got a better contraption. Right. And what was that thing that you pulled out, dude?
It's a vacuum siphon coffee machine, or maker.
Dude, it looked like a scientific experiment in his kitchen. It was amazing. And it was probably one of the best cups of coffee I've ever had in my whole life. So it was awesome.
Pour over is much easier. So I usually stick with that one, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's a great experience to the siphon coffee for sure.
Yeah. So the cherry on top to that whole story is that he also does jujitsu and he's really good. And so we got to train together quite a few times. But, the Lord really started developing our friendship, and we had made it a subsequent trip down to Grand Junction. And Paul and I went out for coffee. And we talked about, like, hey, man, it'd be awesome if the Lord used us in ministry together and we
Yep.
did something. Little did we know it would be recording a podcast
Podcast,
in
right.
his sanctuary,
Yeah.
on Memorial Day weekend,
There you
right?
go.
So
Yeah.
this is a treat, and I was excited. When you had agreed to come on the podcast, we were down here for a seminar. We brought Master Julio with us to do a seminar over at Grand Valley Jiu Jitsu, and we're excited to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Crazy story. But there's some good things to pick up on there. And that is that, really when you meet people in faith, you don't, and it's genuine faith. Even Jared, I just met you, but I feel like I've known you.
Right.
I mean, I definitely had a one-sided conversation with you a little bit, meaning I listened to the podcast. But there's this barrier that's immediately just set down when you come to a conversation with people of like-minded faith.
Mhm.
And then of course we get around coffee. Well, then that's gravy, and you get around jujitsu, you got more gravy. But when you're in Christ, going back to that text, really that conversation, that connection is deep, it's meaningful, and what feels like moments, all of a sudden you feel like you've known somebody for a long time.
yeah.
And that's just the kinship of being a Christ follower.
Oh, bro, when you read the epistles, isn't it like that when Paul writes the letters? It's like, hey, man, I'm probably, a 3-month ship ride away, but I'm with you right there, brothers.
Yeah.
And so, and then he wanted to go back and visit with the places that that the churches were planted, and I'm sure that it was that kind of, this sweet time of communing together.
Yep, absolutely.
And it's neat to be here, man. I'm glad to see you. And so tell us, man, a little bit about your background. Like growing up, so Paul's a pastor, he's a jujitsu practitioner, he's an entrepreneur. You breed dogs. Do you still breed dogs?
Yeah,
Yeah.
occasionally. Yeah,
Occasionally
we're
breed
still- but
dogs.
we still have dogs.
So
Yep.
so you're involved in a lot of things.
Yeah.
And you're a coffee master.
Yeah,
Like-
yeah. So, upbringing, man, I did not, for those of you, that are tuning in right now, all of us have different backgrounds. You might have a similar one to mine. And that is that I didn't grow up in church. I was not churched. My family was outside of faith. I mean, we were Catholic by name, but that didn't mean much. We weren't actually in church, if you will.
Now you grew up in
Southern
Colorado,
Yep.
down by the New Mexican border.
Yep.
Yep.
Grew up in Southern Colorado, small town, Monte Vista, Colorado, and or Monte Vista, depending if you're using your English or Spanish.
Yeah.
No
No Espanol.
Yeah. So yeah, and the funny thing about that is, like, I grew up around Spanish, but I never grew up learning Spanish.
Really?
And
Really?
then as I got saved, I got involved in churches that were very bilingual.
Mhm.
And it was like, okay, I need to learn Spanish now. And so interesting, a little side story to that is that my wife and I actually went and spent, in 2006, we spent 6 weeks in Costa Rica at a language school.
Yeah, I know. I'm familiar
And-
with that school. A buddy of
and-
mine had gone there before going to plant a mission in Ecuador.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we, learning Spanish, but yeah, so I, was around it, but I never learned it. But long story short is my upbringing was not one of faith, at all. And so, 17 years old, I'm in a situation where it's several run-ins with the law. I'm been in and out of, juvie, and now I'm in a situation where I'm looking at some serious time. And I'm there, and it's a Sunday morning. I like to tell this story because it was pivotal for me. That was kind of one of those moments, right? And so I'm in jail. It's a Sunday, and they say, "Hey, we're gonna have a service. So would you come? It's gonna be a Bible study, whatever." And man, my heart was so hard. I was just like, nah, there's no way I'm not singing Kumbaya with you guys and whatever you guys do. I'm like, that's just stupid. My heart was,
Yeah.
17-year-old rebellious kid, thug, wannabe gangster, and I'm just like, there's no way. And so I didn't go, and spent that day just doing whatever. And that evening, I'm in my cell that night, and it's that first moment where I felt like I had this unction from the Lord that just said, pray.
Hmm.
And I'm like, I don't even know how to pray. Cause in my mind, you should know the Lord's Prayer, right?
Sure.
And so I'm like, well,
Did you go to church as a kid? Even,
I mean,
there was some Catholic influence.
yeah, but
right?
not enough to even know the Our Father, you know? So never did First Holy Communion, none of that stuff.
You weren't
right?
tuned in.
No.
Okay.
So when it's like pray, I'm like, what do I do? And then I found myself praying for just, Lord, be with my friends. You know, my best friend, Carlos, at the time, he was locked up too. And different place. But, you know, I find myself just praying for my friends, praying for my family and just lifting them up, not knowing what I'm praying really. And then in that moment that night, I'm praying, Lord, if you're real, would you show me? And that seems to be one of those prayers that many people who are outside of faith and they come to faith, it's kind of like this test before the Lord. Lord, if you're real, would you show me? And I'll tell you what, that started a 25-year journey. And it started a journey of faith where I came out of jail literally the next day, went and saw the juvenile judge, was on house arrest. And then through a series of just situations, the pastor of my dad's church, because my dad was involved in church, came to the house and he says, hey, I want to meet with you. And I'm literally smoking a joint, you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm like, he knocks on the door and I'm like putting it behind my back. Like, and he's like, hey, I came to meet with you. And he's like, I'm like, you're going to have
Lord,
to, like,
if you're real, show me.
yeah, I'm like, you're going to
knock, knock.
I told him, I mean, literally, you know, you can't hide it. I mean, it's like smoke's coming up my back, you know what I mean? And I'm like,
and I'm sure he didn't smoke, so he smelled it for
oh,
sure.
dude. And I'm like, you're going to have to come back. I'm like, I'll meet with you, but you know, you're going to have to come back.
Yeah.
Like, now's not a good time.
You're interrupting.
Yeah. So that was my first interaction with him. And then just a few short months later, I mean, God just radically got a hold of my heart, radically got a hold of my life. And not just mine, my brother's life, you know, my sister's life. And then it just began a journey. I mean, within a few months after that, not quite a year, I was in Bible college. I was still on probation, had to check in with my probation officer. I was in Bible college. And you know, the interesting thing about timeframes is that now, this August, I'm going to be really looking at celebrating 25 years of ministry, because I count that first year for me was about ministry. It was about sharing what God did in my heart with other people. And it wasn't tainted with like this church background. It was raw, unfiltered. I would still go to parties and house parties, and we used to rap back then. So everything was like battle rapping, you know? And I remember being in those parties, and when I would be having these conversations with my friends, I'm trying to lead them to faith. And before you know it, we start battle rapping, right? And my it was like the witness. I just started like, the Lord's about to save you. You know, it just,
Dude, break it down. That's
it was like these epic moments. Yeah. And it was just like, and I know it was spirit led, right?
Yes.
But it was this boldness that in those moments, I was like, I'm going to share Christ. And then, you know, of course, there was a season though where I had to realize, okay, it's probably not a good idea for me to be hanging out at these parties, you know? So then it was like, all right, now my pastor challenged me. He said, you know, maybe you shouldn't go there anymore. And then went, you know, but from the get-go, it started. And so now it's been 25 years. We're here at Junction Community Church. And this is, you know, I've been lead pastor here. In August will be 15 years. So, you know, now I look back and I say, well, man, where does the time go?
Yeah.
But when you're on a journey with the Lord, every day's an adventure. And that's what you know, I know this is for men, right?
Yeah.
And let me just say this, like men, like this is when you're listening to this, you're hearing my story or any story or a different podcast, another episode. Like what you need to hear is God doesn't just invite you to be a good boy. He invites you to an adventure. And that's what you have to realize. Like this is like life is meant to be lived as an adventure. And as men, it doesn't mean we just come into these safe environments where all of a sudden, you know, we're cookie cutter, we dress the part, we look the part, we act the part, we talk the part. No, it's like God made us who we are to be men who influence, who go out and adventure, who for fun try to choke each other unconscious. You know what I mean? Like,
hey, bro, I was at a pastor's conference this week, and Jared was there.
Yeah.
They let me get up and share, and I said, you know, I loved being a pastor, but owning a jiu-jitsu academy, I love choking people for Jesus. And I said it gives a whole new meaning for laying on of hands.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
So yeah, you and Jared have a lot in common. You know, he tried to witness to pimps and drug dealers.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
And then finally realize that, alone, because,
Yeah.
I think God sends us out 2 by 2
Yeah.
for a purpose. Alone, that wasn't a wise idea. And so, bro, that's an amazing backdrop to where God has you
Yeah.
now. So, what does your faith journey look like? You kind of gave us that abbreviated view, but I think a lot of times when someone comes to faith, and Jared and I have talked about this
Yeah.
in the past, you think, okay, what now, Lord?
Mm.
Or everything is going to be perfect, and we know that's not to be true.
Not at
But
all.
I also agree with you that I think that some people think, oh, my life is going to change and I'm going to be this like vanilla cookie cutter Christian now.
Yeah.
And that wasn't the case for me, wasn't the case for you, and it wasn't the case for Jared. And I don't know people that have been radically saved that has happened to.
Yeah.
And so to look at it as an adventure, you can imagine, right? When Jesus goes down and meets the fisherman, he's like, hey, I'm going to make you fishers of men. And then he has them go drop their nets in, and now they're picking up all this fish. They're like, whoa, like
Yeah.
we couldn't catch fish all day. And now, Lord, you're delivering. Man, that's, to me, I'd like to think of it. They were just like excited and things were happening, but they went through ups and downs. I mean, the
Absolutely.
ministry wasn't perfect, and Jesus was showing them, hey, you're going to experience some things for my sake that aren't going to be fun, but they're going to be adventurous for sure.
Yeah.
They're not going to be this normal life of you just going out on the boat and dropping a net in the water
Yeah.
or collecting taxes. Or for you, right, your life radically changed. So you're sitting in a jail cell and it's like, okay, what now?
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
you're in Bible college, pick up like from there.
Yeah. So on that note, the adventure, the key thing is this, that the adventure is never up and to the right.
Hmm.
It's like the rhythms of our heartbeat. It's got a high and it's got a low. And life is that. Every day is that. It's a series of highs and lows. And that's every story.
Yeah.
The problem I think that exists is when people fixate on their lows and they fixate on their failures and the moments where they're inadequate, they're not enough, they've dropped the ball, whatever it is, and they think that's who I am. And I just that's not who we are. That's a mistake we made. That's a situation certainly that would be one of our lows, but it doesn't define who we are or where we're going, right?
Yep.
In this adventure. But every adventure is filled with those mountaintop moments and certainly some lows. So I go to Bible college and I'm in a situation where I do my first 3 years and then it was back then, there wasn't online school. You weren't just gonna say, hey, I'm gonna take some time out. We're gonna finish online. So I decided, hey, I'm gonna take a time out. I'm gonna get married. We're gonna kind of start ministry. And I had enough coursework to work on all my ordination through our denomination. And then we jump into ministry. And that's we're in Denver at the time. We're living in the city. And then we spend about 6 years there. And we get married. Before you know it, we a few years later we had our first daughter, and we have 3 daughters, by the way. And Mary and I will be celebrating 21 years of marriage in July.
Awesome.
Praise God.
So, and our daughters are currently 18, 15, and 12, and all girls. And so, but we get going in life, we get going in ministry, right? And then fast forward, I'm here in 2019, and I never finished my degree.
Mm.
And I was like, I didn't really need it. I've got the ordination. I've been leading this church for, at the time, 13 years, 12 years, something like that, over a decade. And then I feel this call to say, hey, go back and finish your degree. And it was like, okay. And that's a weird feeling. Like you're now, in your late 30s and you're like you feel like a seventh grader all over again, and you're walking onto a campus, because I started here locally and then I finished online through my original college. But, in every step of the way, it's just there's these moments where you really have to dig in.
Mm.
And in that season, wrapped up a year ago, finished the BA now. And that I like to say, I stretched it out over 18 years.
Yeah.
It's like it took
Are you the first one in your family to finish college?
No, I'm not.
Yeah.
My sister, she did, and then she's actually working on her master's, so she's trying to one up me right now.
Got it.
And but yeah,
Competition is good,
for
buddy.
sure. And she's also a church planter in Hawaii.
Wow.
Her and her
Wow.
husband, and so my journey, there's a long to every story. There's a lot of nuances to a person's story, and I think as I look back, the Bible college season was great, but then you get in real life ministry.
Mm,
And, our first season in Denver, I thought I would live and die in Denver. I thought that would be it. In fact, my pastor was really gearing us up to lead that church. And then just through a series of things, we just knew it wasn't right.
got it.
And so we knew that it was going to be a time where we had to really just seek the Lord again and say, okay, what's next? Because I thought Denver would be it forever.
Yep.
And then it was like, well, nah, I'm going to bring you to Grand Junction. And I remember having to research, where is Grand Junction? What's there? I mean, why would I want to move there? Like, what is and it's hard to, believe now it's been 15 years here.
Mm,
And it certainly hasn't been all up and to the right. And if anybody's listening to me, that the last 2 years haven't been that, right?
yeah.
Mm.
And so we've gone through a series of challenges. And if there's one thing that I think is true to my story, not only from my upbringing of non-faith to then faith to being in ministry, is that there are a series of challenges that are going to come at you every day. And we know that that's what the enemy does, right? He comes to steal, kill, destroy. And he's absolutely trying to destroy. But in the middle of all that, God's the author of our story, not the enemy. And we have to remember that through all those challenges, through all those adverse experiences, God is still working out his very best in our lives.
Yeah.
And I think what we do is we judge this story as complete and it's only half written.
Mm.
Like open up,
Yeah.
there's still pages that aren't written.
Yeah.
Mm.
The end's complete,
Yeah.
but the meat of the book is still in
No,
progress,
it's
right?
still in progress.
Yeah.
And I think we lose sight at times where we can't see the forest for the trees. We just lose sight of this fact that there's a bigger picture for our kids,
Mm.
for our ministry, for our businesses, for our careers, for our families, whatever it might be. We lose sight of that. And it's like, God's not done with us yet.
Yep.
That, he's still working out and writing his story. So the last 2 years has been a real challenge for me to really not just COVID. COVID was part of it for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think it turned our world upside down. And if
Right.
we don't acknowledge that and admit that, it's almost like saying, we all went through that. Yeah, we're good.
Hmm.
We made it. Or going through that, however you want to define that. But those 2 years really challenged my faith. It challenged, a lot of things about where we're at as a ministry, where we're going. And there's a number of factors that aligned at just the right time to really get you to go, okay, God, I know you called me, but I feel like somehow I'm doing this alone now,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you really have to kind of dig deep in those moments.
Well, that's interesting because it created a unique leadership challenge for you. And Jared had his experience through the pandemic, and obviously, there's always the threat of it now in the news, right?
Right.
I had my own, as our family transitioned through it, and we made decisions that some people might not agree with the way we handled it. Some people might not agree with the way you handled your transition. Some people might not agree with the way Jared handled the
Mhm.
transition. But at the end of the day, if we all sought the Lord on it, right? Like
Yeah.
we can't judge what God told you to do or what he told Jared to do or what he told me to do or my family to do through that time. So Jared, did anything resonate with you with what he just shared?
Yeah. I mean, getting into like those places in life, right? Where I've had those moments where I've felt alone, right? And then too often and not, I always discovered because like a lot of my story throughout like my 20s and 30s was me running. I was either running away from something or I was constantly getting ahead of God. I'm like, okay, I hear part of what God's saying. I'm like, yeah. I'm gonna handle the rest.
Got it.
And then before you know it, I'm in the middle of nowhere going, now I'm isolated. Now I'm alone. But the big thing that God had to show me when I got injured and I was forced to sit on the couch and during the pandemic was get out of the way.
Mm.
Like you're constantly getting in front. You're constantly standing. He's like, I can't do anything in your life unless you just get out of the way.
Mm.
And like that, like I resonate a lot with like what you've been, talking about. But, for me in those isolated moments, it was because I was the one getting in God's way,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Well, speaking of getting in God's way or finding a space where the Lord can really speak to you, right?
Right.
It's important. We know the cliche, hey, do your devotions, spend time with the Lord, be in his word, pray, all the disciplines that are important for believers, right? But I think there are moments in our lives where the Lord is certainly trying to speak to us at a deeper level.
Mhm.
And if we're not slowing down enough, uh, we can't hear him,
Right.
right? And so I'll couple that with a little story for me recently. So the last couple years challenging, right? And there's a number of things that go along with that. Some of those stories will come out way later when my kids are grown, but um, challenging stories, right? But also we went through a series of losses as a family, and we lost my wife and I combined. We lost 8 family members in 6 months.
Mhm.
And, one of them being my father-in-law, one of them being my
Are
brother-in-law.
you a tight family on both sides? Meaning,
Yeah, a lot of
Is
connection.
Mary tight with her side of the family?
Certainly for
Yeah.
Mary, certainly really tight. Obviously losing her dad, I mean, that's immediate family,
Yeah.
right? And so going through all that, like you get to this space where you have to slow down for the Lord to speak,
Mhm.
right? And it reminded me of another season in of ministry here, pastoring this church, being a couple years in, actually right when I started jujitsu. I was at a time where I was very discouraged, to be honest with you, as a pastor.
Mm.
And I was really down, and I was certainly unhealthy. I was 35 pounds heavier. I was, just in a space where I'm like really like, okay, I need some things to change. And so I sat down with some elders, and they're
Did
like,
anyone speak that in your life, or did the Lord speak that, or did you just come to it with some quiet time with the Lord?
as far as getting healthy.
Well, yeah, just like, hey, man, there's things in your life that need to change.
Well, okay, a couple of things. So these elders, from the church that were really, we love them dearly. They're family to us, right? We sat with them one night, and they said, "Well, what do you need? Like, what do you feel like you need in this season?" And they're praying. They're praying with us. They're walking with us,
Mm.
and I felt like, and that season and the season we just
Mhm.
came out of, they connect, right? But what I felt like I needed is, I was like, I need to talk to somebody outside of my circle, somebody who can help me see things from a different perspective, because there's something powerful about sitting with somebody that can just help you see, like, just turn your head a little bit this way. I see it.
Yeah.
It's different than I imagined. It's different. So what they said is, hey, we're going to pay for you to go to counseling then. Let's
Mm.
start there. Let's start with the counselor. And so I find a local guy that's connected to a local men's group here in our city who's counseling a lot of men. I said, hey man, I want to sit with you. And honestly, I'm a skeptic.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, I counsel people
He's a
all the
Christian
time.
counselor?
Christian
Yeah,
guy.
good.
I counsel people all the time. What are you going to tell me? Like, it's going to be a big
Mm.
waste of time,
Mhm.
waste of their money because they're paying for it. Like, and that
You know what
first
that is, right?
pride,
Ego.
ego. Yeah. And the first session, I walked away and I see, I told you,
Mm.
but I went back.
Yeah.
And I went back, and it was through that. It wasn't even anything he said, but it was through that I slowed down long enough to hear the Lord.
Mm.
And it was through that he finally, speaking of knocking on doors, he's finally knocking on my door of my heart. And I'm like, Lord, change this situation. And I'm dealing with an IRS problem that I inherited as the church. And I'm like, man, that's a bigger monster than I can imagine. And so I'm like walking through all these things, right? This is the previous season. And I'm saying, man, it's just so frustrating. Lord, fix it, Lord, make a way, and I'm praying, and I'm like, Lord, just tell me what to do and I'll
Mhm.
do it, those kind of prayers, right? And I get into the moment where I'm like, okay, Lord, what are you trying to do here? What are you trying to speak? What are you trying to say? And through those moments of being still before him, he started to speak.
Well, when we come back from this break, we'll hear what he spoke to you. But guys, if you're struggling right now with something and you're feeling isolated and you don't know where to go, obviously go to the Lord first. But I agree, Paul. I do the same thing. I've got a group of guys in my life that speak into my life, and they're not part of my immediate circle, and so they can see things from another perspective that
Yep.
the people that are running in life with me can't. Um, so men, don't be afraid to reach out to other men, even if it's a Christian counselor or a Christian life coach, to help give you some new perspective from a biblical perspective, not
Yeah.
a worldview perspective. We'll be
Absolutely.
right back. So we're back, Paul. let's pick up where we left off. What did the Lord speak to you?
So in that those moments, those where I was in these sessions, right? I really started to understand again just that value of like get some perspective. And sometimes you just need to vent with somebody. You just need to just pour out your heart, and really they don't say anything,
Mm.
but when you talk it out loud, then you're able to hear something. Well, for me in that moment, kind of like with you, Jared, like I really just the Lord started to speak to me,
Mm.
right? And what he said to me, which was so clear, is that Paul, I'm not trying to change your situation. I'm trying to change your heart.
Mhm.
And in that moment, you go, man, I've been like, Lord, fix this and fix them and change this situation. And Lord, provide here or do this or do that. And the Lord's just like, shh, son, son, I'm trying to get your attention, but you're too busy focusing on all the things and what needs to change. And it was loud and clear. He said, look, son, I'm not trying to change your situation. I'm trying to change your heart.
Mm.
And it was in that I finally said, surrender, right? You surrender before the Lord and you realize that, hey, God is not interested in fixing some of those things in our lives. Because if he fixed them, the adventure would just be cute little story that we tie up and
Yeah.
we put an exclamation point on the end and it's picture perfect. But that's not what makes, speaking of, this podcast, that's not what makes uncommon disciples. You know what I'm saying? Like you really have to go through the fires. And so it was the fire where the Lord spoke in that season. And out of that is where the Lord just said, all right, I'm trying to change your heart. And I knew immediately there had to be some big changes. I knew that meant physical
Yeah.
health. I knew that meant like I needed to,
How was your marriage at the time? You were married.
the interesting thing is Mary and I have had an incredible marriage.
Mm.
21 years, we're celebrating on July 7th, and we've had an incredible marriage. Now, has it been perfect? No, there's not a single marriage out there that's perfect, but we've had one that honestly, our whole story from meeting each other to dating to really committing that dating season to the Lord, to then, being married and living life and doing life, we've had a great marriage. And so I can say that that's the one thing that has definitely been a strength for me
Mm.
throughout every season. She's been in,
Was she
and really it's
speaking?
her,
Was she speaking to you
of
into
course.
your life
Yeah.
at this point? Like, did she know that you needed to tap out?
Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely,
Yeah.
definitely like and she's like, we need to meet with somebody. We need to talk to somebody.
Mm.
And it was about what was going on in me, right? And thankfully, everybody's story is different. So
Yeah.
some of you are saying, hey, my problem is my marriage.
Yep.
And I get that. Like you're gonna have a different path to what that looks like. But for me, like it was really like the Lord was like, I'm trying to heal your heart.
Yeah.
And as if he did all the work back then, right? So fast forward, the last year of our lives, complete chaos, lots of loss, parenting challenges. And for those of you that are raising teenagers, you know the challenges. And then you know that there's some challenges that when you really look at them and you evaluate as a parent, you're like, okay, yeah, that's a level 2. It's really not that bad. You'll get through that. That's a level 5. Okay, it's a little tough day. And then you have level 10s, and you're like,
Yeah.
okay, this is a deep
Immediate
situation.
action drill.
Yeah, this
Right.
is, and
Activate.
that was what it's been like for the last really 4 years in our
Mm.
parenting journey. And so there's all these things that are coupling and lining up. And I finally was just like, you know what? I feel like I need a timeout.
Yep.
And I had a responsibility also to my father-in-law passed away, and his estate is in New Mexico. It's 6 hours from where we live. My brother-in-law also passed away. So the guy who would have been there with me, like figuring it out, who lived in the same town and would have, done all the work there.
Yep.
He passed too. And they passed away within a couple of months of each other.
Wow.
And so now it's like the guy who I would be leaning on is not there. And my father-in-law's gone. And when you look around, you're like calling the reinforcements, and you're like, no, you're the dude, you're the guy, man. And so I came to my church leadership team, my lead team, 3 of my associate pastors, and I say, guys, look, I need to go and I need to deal with this. And I also need to deal with some things in my heart, because right now I'm in an unhealthy space and I need you guys to gather around me.
When was
And
this?
this was September of last year. So this is
Okay.
brand new. This
Got
is
it.
fresh. September of last year, I sit down with the guys. I call them the 6 a.m. meeting, because we would do a 6 a.m. meeting. We get together, tell them, look, this is where I'm at. There's a lot of things, a lot of factors. There's some big responsibilities. There's things I have to deal with, and I need some time to do that. And they all looked at me and said, "We're with you." And I said, "Okay, we got 8 weeks. I'm going away for 2 months, and here's the keys. And I don't want to hear anything over the next 2 months." Now, most pastors, they feel like they're writing their their resume at that point. They're
Yeah.
done, right? I knew that I can trust these men. Three of our pastors here, incredible men: Pastor Micah, Pastor Josh, Pastor Abel. Been with me. One of them's my brother. The other two have been with me for a long, long time,
Mm.
and we've done life together. And really, I go away, and I spend of those 8 weeks, I spent 6 weeks alone. I'm in New Mexico. I'm dealing with my father-in-law's estate,
Away from the family?
mostly away from the family. They would come to visit. I did come back here, from time to time. But I spent the greater part of 6 weeks alone. And through that, I'm really saying, "Lord, what are you doing?" And I already knew, okay, Lord, I know you're not trying to fix my situation. I got that lesson. I know you're trying to work on my heart. So what is it that you're trying to do? Help me make sense of the loss of that, the family members that we lost, and all the situation, the difficulty of parenting and the challenges of COVID and coming out of that. And what does that look like for business and ministry? And what does that look like for life? And all the opinions and the divisions of our country, and all that, right? And what the Lord begins to really speak into my heart and into the heart of my wife is that for us moving forward, we're called to ministry, but specifically the Lord's calling us to provide ministry to pastors.
Mm.
And so we know that we're starting to drive the ship towards that direction, where we're creating a ministry that we're calling Pastoral Respite. And the whole idea behind it is that our hearts in that moment were heavy.
Mm.
And we had places, right? I had a staff that I could walk away for 8 weeks and the
Yeah.
church did well. I had people around me, not only my staff, but my overseers, who I said, "Look, this is what I'm thinking about." And I reached out to all three of them, had all conversations, and they said, "Go." And they said, and initially I was like, "What if I took 4 weeks?" And they were like, "Take 2 months, take 8 weeks, you need to be gone longer." And so I had the green light from my overseers. I had the green light from my staff. Of course, my wife is side by side with me. And out of that, really, I realized that I had all this opportunity to go and do that, right? But there are pastors who are grinding it out. And I'm not talking about pastors who are part of, multi-staff churches and where they've got all these resources and they got people around, much like I do. I mean, we're
Yeah.
a small church, but we have a great staff, right? And so I'm realizing, like, there's pastors and their families, and they're burning out.
Mm.
And they're feeling like they're alone. And the Lord just dropped it on our hearts that there's going to be a ministry for us that is really geared towards speaking into the hearts of pastors and their families.
Let me ask you this, because I see the same issue with pastors that are burning at both ends,
Mm.
right? Then they get to the middle and they burn out.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to men that aren't in pastoral ministry, that are experiencing that same sense of burnout and feeling like they're just coming to the end of themselves, right? Because it happens out in the corporate world. It
happening
happens
everywhere.
out, especially in this economy, right?
Yeah.
A lot of guys have a lot of pressure to perform.
Yep.
And a lot of pressure to find additional income. But I'm sure you're dealing with that here at the church where
Yeah.
people come to you. What do you tell them when
So-
they come to you? Because you've experienced it firsthand.
Yep.
Like, hey, I need to, and thankfully you do jujitsu, so you know the art of submission
Yeah.
and tapping out,
Yeah.
right? So you had to tap out in order to get to a place where God could speak to you, to get that alone time. But some guys can't tap out, meaning they just can't stop life because then they stop feeding or stop being able to provide for
Yep.
their families.
So there's challenges. There's challenges for sure that we're facing culturally, right?
Mhm.
So we live in a culture that we no longer have private places. If you're at all on social media, which if you're listening to this probably tells me that at some point you're connecting to some sort of social media, right?
Sure.
And so there's a constant bombardment and attack on our attention, on our time,
Mhm.
right? And so even the necessity of like providing, the necessity of being there for our families is multiplied by the pace of life that we live, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's studies that say like people who live in a certain city that they tend to walk faster. if they live in the city as opposed to if they lived in a rural area.
Sure.
They walk faster, they do life faster. That's the pace of life. So it comes back to really, the simplicity of the gospel message,
Mhm.
which is what? Like, not only does Christ save us, but then he invites us to model our lives after how he lived. So let me ask this, was Jesus ever in a hurry?
No. No,
Was he
even
ever?
when Lazarus, died, he's like, yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah.
But I'm saying this, Paul, because again, I think in those times where guys are struggling, right? They tend to, and it happened to me in life, right? Even during my Christian walk, I found unhealthy things to do to
Yep.
fill the voids that I didn't want to address,
Yeah.
right? So the stuff that the Lord revealed to your heart during that time, I'm sure he spoke to you. Okay, well, maybe he's taking you on a new mission,
Yep.
right? You didn't need to resign. He just was kind of developing a new mission for what he wanted you to do. But guys that are like literally in the grind, they're waking up at 6 a.m. They're not coming home until 5, 6 o'clock at night, dinner, putting kids to bed. And now they're like, oh, I need some video game time, because I just need to disconnect.
Yep.
Right. And these are things that aren't going to fill them. They're not going to fulfill that void in their life.
Yeah.
Right. So they can't take the 8 weeks off that you took.
No.
Um,
That's a huge benefit for somebody like me.
I don't know if I told my wife, hey, I want to disappear for 8 weeks.
Yeah.
She's like, no, I'm going to disappear for 8 weeks.
Right.
So here's the key.
Mary, you're a saint if you listen in on this podcast.
She's listening, and you are.
Yeah.
And so here's the key. Here's the key is, what are some practical things? Well, and it's countercultural, counterintuitive, because this is a moment where it's less is more. And what I mean by that is that when you look at the life of Jesus, and as he invites us to follow him, he not only modeled that he was never in a hurry, he modeled rest. So we go back to the creation story, right? The Lord rested. Well, the Sabbath is not for the Lord, it's for us, right? And somehow we live in a culture that says we can cheat that. We can cheat the Sabbath. I can work harder. I can work more hours. I can, do more things. And trust me, I'm one of those guys that I do a lot of things, right? I have a lot of side hustles that I do. I don't just pastor a church, I've got side hustles and things I'm working on. I've got hobbies I'm into. I do jujitsu. I do a lot of things. I'm developing this ministry that we're thinking about now as we start to walk towards that. But the thing is this, we've got to go back to places where we rest, and where we really honor the Sabbath. And here's the thing, where we put these things away. At our dinner table, these are not allowed. There's times where you just have to shut off a phone. And you really have to carve out. So you say, well, I don't have the time. And I would argue to differ. I would say you do not have the time.
Yeah.
You have to find places of rest. And so what refuels you if you're looking to something negative? There's a lot of vices out there. There's a lot of things that we can get involved in that at the end of the day, they seem like they provide for a moment that rest that we're looking for. But we're talking about soul rest. And what did Jesus say? He says, come to me, all you who are weary, who are tired, heavy laden, burdened.
Yes.
And that's what Jesus invites us into. In fact, there's a great book that talks about it. And it's the ruthless elimination of hurry. And the idea behind it is learning to rest, learning to value what's most important. So for me, the privilege of 8 weeks, that's a beautiful thing. But really, it's every day. Finding,
so someone else's rest might look different than 8 weeks.
Oh, it absolutely looked different.
Yeah, I don't like the excuse I don't have time for some reason. When guys say that to me, I say, can I see your phone and just pull up your app times for me?
Yeah.
Right. And then I'll go, oh, there's 3 hours right there, man.
Yeah.
Like there's 3 hours. Well, but yeah. No, you said you didn't have time, right? There's a lot of excuses that we make, but if it's important to us, we will make time.
Yep. We make time for what's important to us.
That's right.
And Jesus said it in a different way. He said, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also.
That's right. He did say that.
And so whatever we treasure, whatever we value. In fact, there's this cliche saying that says this, you measure what you treasure, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we do measure, you get on how many of you get on your phone and maybe it's not social media, but you're checking your stocks. You're checking your crypto, you're checking you're checking all your stuff.
I don't think anyone's checking crypto right now.
Yeah. Everybody's like, the ball players are like, this is the time to buy in.
Yeah.
But the point is this, is that we get fixated. We measure those things, but how are we measuring, engaging our relationship with our wives, with our children, with the Lord, most importantly? Because out of that abundance, where we take time to stop, and it doesn't have to be extravagant. We think, well, I want to do something for my wife. That means we're going to, go on a cruise, and we're going to do this, that, and the other. And if you have the means, by all means, do it. But that could just mean daily spaces where you do this. You're not like, yeah, yeah, got it.
Talking while looking at your phone.
Put it away.
Yeah.
Have that conversation.
Yeah.
And do that with your spouses. Do that with the Lord. Do that with your children. Because at the end of the day, for me, anybody else can pastor this church. I can be done tomorrow. They'll find another guy.
Yeah.
It'll happen.
The Lord-
It happens all the time.
The Lord doesn't need us.
Yeah,
to
he
fulfill his
doesn't
work.
need us. But specifically, he's called us for me, to be the husband to Mary, to be the father to Rebecca, Jada, and Selah. And there's nobody else on the face of this planet that can fulfill those roles, right? And so as a man, I have to prioritize the role that anyone else can play over the roles, let me say that better. I have to prioritize the role that no one else can play over the role that anyone else can play. Anyone else can be.
Bro, say that one more time.
Yeah.
That was beautiful.
So I have to, in my life, I have to prioritize the role that no one else can play over the role that anyone else can play. Because at the end of the day, anybody else can pastor this church. Anybody else can lead the business. Anybody else can lead the nonprofit. Anybody else can lead the company, that can lead the department. Anybody else can do all those things, right? They and not only they will. When you retire, they'll replace you.
Oh, yeah.
But
Well, you
nobody-
experienced loss recently, right? The 8 people in your family that passed away. And I realized the people that have passed away that were close to me, I think that at the time they thought they were the most important thing to whatever they were leading at the point.
Yeah.
Right? But they passed away and it's still going on.
Yep.
You know,
And so fast
life
forward.
goes on.
Yep. That fast forward, every one of us, we're on our deathbed. There's going to be some questions we've got to answer at that moment. And they're going to be big ones. But none of us is going to say, I want another day in the office. None of us is going to say, oh, just one more tweet, one more post,
Yes.
one more share, one more like, one more whatever. No. We are going to have the people that we love around us. We're going to be sharing those intimate moments with them. And so why would we wait till the end of our lives? Why don't we wake up every day and live it like it's the last day of our lives?
Yeah.
Put our wives first, put our daughters first, put our families first, put those people who are closest to us first, and say, you know what? I'm going to make time. I'm going to make time to rest. I'm going to make time to take care of myself, because in doing that, I'm going to honor the Lord. I'm going to honor people, and I'm going to live my life today.
Yeah.
Like it's the last
Well,
day.
I think that during the pandemic, I think that people did start to value that, right? Working from home, kids are home from school, right? Some parents are like, I can't do this anymore. And I was like, praise the Lord, they're home,
Yeah.
right? I don't have to pull them out of school to go to the park or go on a hike or to go do something as a family,
Yeah.
right? And during the school year, one of our kids is in public school and he just finished up. But it was kind of frustrating because I like taking our kids and going places and doing things, and not having the ability to do that is frustrating.
Yeah,
But during the
no.
pandemic, it was like, praise the Lord. Hey, your schoolwork's done? Cool.
Let's go.
Let's go to the mall, or
Yeah,
let's,
game on.
let's go on a hike or whatever. But I agree, man. I think that if we took the time not only to value the day, right? To value the things in the day that are important, but just to be grateful to be waking up in the morning, right?
Yeah.
Just to be grateful. And I told this to someone else the other day. I said, how you doing, bro? He's like, well, and he starts giving me the sob. And I said, bro, do you know you got it better than 95% of the rest of the world? You're working. You have a house. You have a wife that loves you. You have kids that love you. You have food in the refrigerator, right? I said, dude, you've got it better than 95% of the rest of the world where you're at right now. And I said, that's something to be grateful for.
Yeah.
Right? How many people are waking up with bad news from the doctor or from their employer, right? Like, you're okay, buddy. You know, and he's like,
And here's the truth on that note.
Yeah.
Like, here's the truth. Gratitude is a game changer. Gratitude. So in your life, like if you're going through a tough season or you're going through a tough moment, which we all do, If you're not in one, you'll be in one soon.
Mhm.
But in those moments, you really got to realize that gratitude is a game changer. And, in the seasons where I've gone through difficulty, kind of shared a couple of them here, one of the things the Lord really spoke to me is gratitude, right? Like, what are you grateful for? And then I started to realize there's a ton of guys that would want my job. There's a ton of guys that, yeah, it's not perfect. And yes, I'm facing some
Yeah.
real leadership challenges, but they would want my job.
Yeah.
And so gratitude, being thankful. So in our family, every night when we get together for dinner, of course, phones are away, we have a nightly highlight. And the reason we do that is not because, we just want to overinflate like the positive moments in life. That's not it. It's because it's easy to focus on the negatives. Our sob story, we all have one. And if
Mhm.
you give me enough time, I'll tell you mine. you know? And so we have a sob story, right? And we're gonna go through the negatives, and we got a list of why this didn't happen, and that didn't happen, and they and them and whatever. And so you have to stop and be intentional about the highlight.
Mm.
So we at our family dinner table, we always ask, "What's your highlight?" And we don't want to know what was the best part of your day. Now, sometimes it's robotic and it's like, mine was school, mine was lunch,
Yeah.
mine was. But at the end of the day, what it really does in a family dynamic is it starts to open up conversation. That's
Yeah.
the real value.
Sure.
But it also reminds us to be grateful.
Yeah, we do the same thing, and then once a week we do it's kind of like a business meeting, like a family meeting. We get together and we're studying a book of the Bible right now, but we go around the table. I make the kids prepare a little 10-minute message, and what did God speak to you through these verses? And it's been amazing to watch their growth and their excitement and what God's been speaking to
Mm.
them. But yeah, remembering, because listen, we can start to walk around and throw a little pity party for ourselves, and
Yeah.
our kids do it.
Yep.
They're fighting, for who's going to do dishes or whatever, and it's like, we're called to love one another. Like I
Yeah.
don't want to hear it during the time of I'm not doing pots and pans,
Yeah.
But that little bit of gratitude, right? Or they come home and say, hey, my friend's dad died. And
Mm.
I'm like, man, obviously let's pray for them, but I'm still here.
Yeah.
You've got something to be grateful for,
Yep.
you know,
Yeah.
and just finding those little things to be grateful for, I think are game changers,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Even in the moments of despair,
Yeah.
right?
They're
Because
always there.
they're hard because the enemy just keeps them suppressed,
Mhm.
the gratitudes, he wants to bring to surface the poor me's and I've got it bad or my life is horrible.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so good,
It's
man. That was
easy.
so good. And Jared, what do you have? You're looking at me.
No, I'm good.
Good?
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. So man, that was so awesome. Um, we're gonna be going to do jujitsu tonight and you're gonna be at open mat tomorrow. So real quick, how has jujitsu changed your life as far as either coming alongside parallel in faith, taught you some things about yourself that you didn't know? Because I encourage guys that, hey, if you're out drinking in the bar or if you're doing unhealthy things, that jujitsu could be healthy for you.
Yep.
If
Absolutely.
you do it right, right?
Yep.
If you're not coming in trying to rip people's heads off, because if you do that, you're going to get injured,
And
right?
you're gonna get humbled
Yeah,
anyway.
and find a good school that
Yeah.
that they're really going to teach you the fundamentals before throwing you into the fire per se,
Yeah.
right? But what's jujitsu taught you, and even
So
now, even through these difficult times, because you
yeah.
said, yeah, I'm starting to roll again, I'm feeling good, and
Yep. So yeah, I think adversity's a word we've thrown around. Adventure is one that we've thrown around. But in every adventure, there's adversity. And jujitsu, I mean, when you do jujitsu, and you guys know, there are life lessons on the mats every
Yes.
day, right?
Yes.
Every day. So for me, there was a huge turning point. When I started doing jujitsu, that's when I got healthy.
Mm.
It physically started happening. And I always say, there's still this chubby little boy that lives on the inside of me, though. He just wants to eat. He just wants to not do anything. But it changed my life. Jiu-jitsu did absolutely change my life. But the parallels to faith are huge. I mean, talk about community.
Mm.
Like those you grapple with make you better.
Yeah.
And so there's community in jiu-jitsu. There's something powerful to a release of health.
Yes.
We're facing a mental health pandemic, I would say, in our culture, right? And I think that social media and all the things that the technology has really ramped that up, right? But one way to rewind the clock, if you will, is to get into a primal situation where you either work out, you exercise, but jujitsu, there's nothing like it. You
Yeah.
know, you can push weights, but when you got another guy pushing against you,
Yeah.
or somebody, you know, that training partner, it does something to you that's primal, and it brings you back to a situation where you just find this peace. You're in the
Yeah.
moment, you know?
Dude, I think men have been built for battle and adversity, right? You think about even when Jesus was beaten and spat on, right? And he was going through some difficult times, right? But you think about like what's going on with the war overseas right now, right? Farmers, farmers and bakers are picking up weapons and going to war,
Mm,
right? And it's in the jiu-jitsu mat. Obviously, we're not necessarily going to war. We could be going to war with ourselves,
yeah,
right? The things that we're struggling with, is things that are really eating at us, or some things in us that are unhealthy,
yeah,
right? The ego and the pride. Oh,
yeah.
I've arrived.
That
Then you
will
get on
get
the mat, and then all of a sudden, you're tapping out and going, maybe I haven't arrived,
yeah.
you know. And faith is a lot like that, right? Where the Lord gets us to a point, and He just wants us to submit.
You know what it helps us do? It helps us be in the moment.
Mm,
And I
present.
think in life we're present. There's such power in that. Either we're living back there, or we're living over
Yeah.
there somewhere, right?
Yeah, when I'm grappling,
And
dude, I don't think about my bills or
it's in the moment.
Yeah.
or something bad that happened at work.
Man, I had that this week. I was getting ready to go to jujitsu, and Mary was like, I was like, man, I kind of don't feel like going. I was doing that whole thing, you know.
Yeah.
I was like starting to build the excuses in my head, and then I was kind of around a moment that was like pressing me a little bit, and I just in that moment I was like, I need to go. And when I got there, I'll tell you what, halfway, like after drilling and then rolling, I forgot all about it. Like literally
that
forgot
funny?
about it. Like
Yeah.
I was on the drive home. I was almost back to the house, and I
Yep.
was like, oh yeah. And so it allows you to be in the present.
Yeah.
And I think that is a great takeaway for life, is be present.
Yeah.
Be there.
Hey, you know what's funny, bro? Something that parallels what you just shared. I had a little pity party this morning with myself. I feel like I've been grinding for the last 3 weeks and waking up this week every morning at like 4:15, not because I wanted to,
Yeah.
because I just had things to get done. And I had forgotten that we do a Friday morning Bible study at the Jiu-Jitsu Academy. And I literally, the alarm went off, and I had a little stuffy nose, and I'm just kind of like just exhausted, and didn't go to bed until real late last night. And I went, I'm not going. Like literally, that's what I said. My mind was saying, I'm not going today. Someone else has a key, and they'll figure it out, right? And the Lord said, get up.
Yeah.
And I went, dang it. And I
Yeah.
got up, and it was a wonderful time this morning.
Yeah.
And again, I just forgot all about, being tired, or, not wanting to do things. And that's that. So sometimes, right, when we start hearing those things from the enemy, like, don't go to jujitsu.
Yep.
Just
Yep.
relax on the couch.
Yep.
Don't get up for Bible study.
Yep.
Just hit the snooze button.
Yep.
Get up.
Get up.
Just get up.
Yep.
So listen, we do this thing called Final Thoughts. Paul, you've listened in on the podcast. And so this is just a few minutes to speak into men's lives, something that the Lord put on your heart during the podcast, or something that, that you really, that you're passionate about right now, that would help encourage or exhort men with where they're at right now. Did this. I told you we listened to one of your messages, and you said, rise up. So final thoughts.
Yeah. Final thoughts. All right, man. A lot of good stuff I think we covered here. Just in terms of, hopefully as you're listening, it's the Lord stirring in you, because a lot of times people, when I'm speaking, I speak most Sundays.
Sure.
And people will say, you said this to me. And I'm like, no, that was the Holy Spirit. So hopefully the Holy Spirit's been speaking to you, man, as you're listening to this podcast. Final takeaway for me is this, speaking about rise up, I think goes back to this thought that, you have to prioritize the role that no one else can play over the role that anyone else can play. And so men in our lives, there are things that we are called to, that it's our burden alone to bear. And I say it in that sense because really it's us. There's nobody else. You can't look. Like, our relationship with the Lord is just here,
Yes.
right? Like, I can't get to heaven and be like, man, well, I was friends, like I had some really good friends, Jared, I got to know him, and does that earn me some points? No, it's going to be me and the Lord, right? My relationship. So in your life, I would just say, like, put first things first, prioritize those relationships, prioritize that relationship with the Lord. And you know what? Step up. When you look back and say, hey, I can't do it. And you've got all the list of excuses of why you can't and why maybe it's your upbringing, man. I shouldn't be on this stage right now.
Mm.
Like my upbringing wouldn't allow me to be here. My dad and my grandfather, they weren't preachers of the gospel. They weren't pastors, but the Lord had something for my life. And I would say this to everyone listening, the Lord has something for you. And so you need to hear that from the Lord. What is it that he wants to speak into you? And then raise up. Time to rise up. I'll close with this thought. So Nehemiah, powerful story, right? But at the end of the book of Nehemiah, he says, Lord, remember me with favor for all that I did. And every day he lived his life as if he was living a legacy. And that's what you're doing. That's what I'm doing. We're living a legacy every day. And when we get to our lives and we look back, will we be able to say to the Lord, Lord, remember me with favor because I lived to honor you and to honor those that you entrusted to me. Yeah.
Amen.
That is a big amen
Yes.
for the end of the podcast, bro. It's so good seeing you.
Absolutely.
And we're going to be here training together here for the next couple of days. So we love you, and we can't wait to have you up in Castle Rock to train with us up there, maybe do a part 2 to this.
Yeah, love you guys too, man. I'm looking forward to it.